Well, it's only fitting that we should have two of George's very favorite singers do a song for you, duet fashion. He called this next guy, his nickname for him was Sweet Pea, and he just thought he was one of the best things to ever happen to country music. The other lady he did a duet with called You Don't Seem to Miss Me. And I remember one of her early hits was If My Heart Had Windows, sort of a remake of one of George's songs. Well, I should say her version of the song. She was so nervous about doing that song that George was going to be at the opera, and she said, Keith, would you go on the bus and play that for him and just get his reaction? So I took it on the bus. I said, George, she wants you to hear this. And one of the little characteristics, and I know you guys know, if George didn't like something, he'd start sucking through his teeth. Like that. Never once did he suck air through his teeth. He listened intently. He said, you tell that little girl she can record any of my songs anytime she wants to. Everybody was happy. Would you welcome Vince Gill and Patty Loveless?
My favorite thing to notice about today is how hard each of us have struggled to get up those stairs. Oh. Brother George taught us all how to sing with a broken heart. Better than anybody that ever lived. And I personally am grateful he nicknamed me Sweet Pea. At first I wasn't so sure about it, but anytime I would go anywhere and somebody would call me Sweet Pea, I knew why. It's because they love George Jones. And the great thing is every time somebody calls me Sweet Pea, I'll get to think of the man. And it was great to hear Keith talk about Patty's record of If My Heart Had Windows, because that's the first time Patty and I ever sang together, was on that record. And I've always felt that when Patty and I sang together, it was very much like the duets that George did with Melba Montgomery. There was an anointing that happened when those two people sang together. And I've always felt that with you, and I always will. And Patty and I have a great history together of singing on each other's first records, and first records that did well. And I remember making my first record with Patty's now husband, Emery Gordy. I remember I was singing the first song on this record, and he pushed the talk back down, and he said, I just want to tell you something. He said, we already have George Jones. He said, you need to find a way to sing like you. And Emery, I'm grateful for that. I got the opportunity to tour as I had my first hit record. I made records for a lot of years, but I tell people I couldn't prove it because nobody had them. But, I stuck with it and didn't know how to do anything else, and I stuck with it, and I finally had a big hit, and Patty sang on it with me. It was When I Call Your Name, and because of that, I got to start working a little bit and go out and do shows. And George and Conway Twitty invited me to come and do shows with them. Now, Barbara, you were lucky because you got to play before George, but in those days, George demanded to go on first, and Conway demanded to go on last. That left the idiot with one hit song in the middle of all this greatness. And those were my favorite days of all. They were my favorite days of all, to get to be sandwiched in between two of the greatest singers ever. And I value that friendship more than anybody will ever know. And my favorite memory of all is, for some reason, George thought I liked ravioli. And cases and cases of the worst ravioli you ever ate in your life wound up on my bus. I still have some if you'd like some historical ravioli from Brother George. But Patty, would you like to say anything? I'm sure you would.
Absolutely. You want me over here or over there?
Say something.
Oh, for me to say something. I think you've said it all.
Okay.
Well, when Keith was talking about If My Heart Had Windows, when I recorded that song, I remembered that that they had played it on WSM, and they got a call from some lady that had called in, and said, well, that was really nice what she did, but she can't sing it like George Jones. And you know what? I totally agree. George, I had recently, few years back, did a record to honor a lot of the country music artists that I grew up with on their music. George Jones, he was just as much of my family. The whole household is kind of like George was family to all the Ramies. And I know that Nancy called Emery up and said, well, George is just all upset and just raising Cain. I'll say raising Cain. I can say the other. But said he has gone out to look for Patty's record. We've been shopping. And I'm not going to say where they were shopping at. I won't mention any names. But George was just getting all upset. And they only had 3 of my records at the time, which was Sleepless Nights. And so Emery was asking Nancy, said, what am I in for? What's he all upset about? Well, they didn't have all the records he wanted, and they did recognize George Jones in the store at the time and said, Mr. Jones, we'll get on it. We'll order every one that we can for you. And that was George. He was always supportive of me, and God, I'm going to miss him, Nancy. And like I told you, I'm just a phone call away, and I'll be there for you whenever you call me. I love you.
It's great to hear Charlie Daniels talk about the high spirit of his belief. And Barbara also mentioned those shoes. It's my belief they don't make those shoes anymore. I know your life on earth was trouble, and only you could know the pain. You weren't afraid to face the devil. You were no stranger to the pain. Go rest high on that mountain. Somewhere on earth is done. Go to heaven and shout love for the Father and the Son. Oh, how it cried the day you left us. We gathered round your grave to grieve. Wish I could see angels' faces when they hear your sweet voice sing. Go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. to heaven and shout love for the Father and Son. Go to heaven and shout love for the Father and Son.
Vince Gill and Patty Loveless, ladies and gentlemen, both members of the Grand Ole Opry and a couple of George Jones' very favorites. George championed those who were about tradition, and those are two of the great ones right there that have held to that path without a doubt.